Okay, I will. Yeah, I started recording on my computer just in case. Is it fine with everyone?
Yes.
Aaron,
Fine with me.
Kapish. Okay, so then, yeah, thanks a lot for your time. I just wanted to show what's currently happening with the website, because I've been doing a lot of tinkering here and there to enable the upcoming WireMock 3 release, and basically to show a lot of historical changes which have been already merged in the beta version, but wasn't available. And in addition, I would like to discuss what would be interesting to do for the website. There is a Google Doc for meeting notes. I'll mostly be using it for comments, but just in case, put anything here, everyone on the call should have permissions. And let me share my screen. Yeah. Okay. So I had to turn off Spotify, so I'm not embarrassed if the screen pops up. Okay. Do you see my screen? It should be good for the current layout. Just to quickly share what's going on. Yeah, so here's our website project. Okay, let's try. Yeah, so I joined WireMock something like 1 month ago to help with community, etc. And of course, documentation is one of the key aspects there. And let's say documentation could definitely use a bit of love and a lot of updates we needed. So I got some time to actually tinker with it. First thing I did is reworking the continuous delivery flow, because before that it was basically driven by Tom or Mark, who could deploy it locally. Now we have fair continuous delivery, which is powered by GitHub Actions. So basically everything that is merged to the website gets delivered automatically. So now there should be no blockers for the pull requests, etc. So it's just some bits of HR. The website, as of now, is powered by Jekyll. It uses the recent version of Jekyll. We use Ruby 2, which is compatible. And yeah, I have a lot to say about this engine, but it kind of works at the moment, so we can stick with it. And the website, so basically from the main branch, it gets delivered straight to the website. So here, what you see is basically directly from the main branch. There are updates needed here and there, but ultimately I started doing the things. For example, I updated the navbar. So now for the navbar, instead of previous listing of various things, I've doubled down on the frameworks and on the solutions we want to have. So at the moment is, for example, WireMock for Java, WireMock standalone, which would include Docker, etc. Also, there is ongoing work on WireMock Python, and basically other technologies could be included as well. So this is already on the website. Also, you can see that there is WireMock 3.x. So how it works at the moment, if you go to the documentation, you basically see the documentation with a warning. And what happens under the hood on the website, we don't copy content for WireMock 3.x. Instead of that, we use this 3.0.0 beta branch. And then some magic is applied. So long story short, there is a Git submodule that basically takes the information. So his submodule that basically pulls the branch locally. And then we use GitHub action to basically take this information and to embed it into the website. So at the moment, there is no robots configured and other things. So basically everything is indexed by the search bot. But otherwise, this flow is working. So basically, when we deploy, we just build the website twice. And then there is very high-tech copy that basically puts it to the right place. thanks to the recent patches and switching to related links, everything works. But yeah, again, this is not something I would consider a state-of-the-art solution. This is the only thing how I could do it in Jekyll at the moment without copy and paste. From the user perspective, we basically get all the navigation. So there are Jekyll templates which determine version. And basically when you watch, for example, a 3.x baseline, you get a warning that it's preview. You can click and go to the same page on the 2.x branch and vice versa. So for 2.x, if you click, you also get to the extension. At the moment, there is no intelligent logic that determines whether a new page is present. So it's something on my backlog, but at least it works. Also, just interesting thing. So I started linking the WireMock Java roadmap for 3.x. So basically, this is a roadmap I shared in the community a while ago, confirmed with Tom. So a lot of items there. Yeah, it's a kind of preview anyway, but at least gives some insights what we want to have in WireMock.3, which was missing before. If you have any questions, comments, just feel free to interrupt me. So anything so far? Okay. So going back to the documentation. So this is what we have at the moment in the main branch. For the record, I also configured the Dependabot in the repository. Now it operates only with submodels. So every time we update beta version, at some point, basically daily, the content will be pulled into. I can set up a more frequent interval, but basically every maintainer can trigger a Dependabot on their own, so it should be okay for now. There are a few tickets in the repository that I basically created based on my initial evaluation and notes. But basically, as Aaron mentioned, we had two massive issues. So one, versioning. I think that it is more or less addressed. So I have some items like preventing dead links when navigating between versions. But otherwise, I think that it's mostly done by now. So at least it's in the beta stage. Yes, Aaron?
Is the idea going forward with this essentially that kind of once WireMock 3 is released, just assuming that everything is available in WireMock 3, and then as new things are added or modified, that'll be when like versioning links would be added to documentation?
So what I added to the engine, actually, in fact, when we talked to Tom, we already discussed WireMock 4. Because my point when we were talking about it was that we actually want WireMock 3 to happen as soon as possible, because there is a lot of accumulated changes already. And basically there is a disconnect between what Java users run with and what, for example, Docker users run with, because at the moment we ship no official images for 3.x. It's also something on my to-do list. But the idea, at least what we have, is that yeah, there is some must-haves, there is some in-progress things, but there is a lot of things in the backlog, like request matching, like native support for gRPC, etc., which definitely do not quite fit the scope for 3.0 in my, because I think that it would be better to ship 3.0 once we're ready, once we clean up technical debt, etc., and then basically schedule for .x. So what I did in the implementation for the website, so there is baseline YAML file, which at the moment lists the versions. And what we support, we can have multiple current, we can have only one current version. We can have one preview version. So once we release 3.x, what happens? We will make 3x general, we will make 4.x preview, and we will also move 2.x to archive. So the engine already supports it. So all the content will be archived. I will create a branch for 2.x so that we will be able to update the documentation should it be needed. but otherwise it will be a kind of tombstone, and I think we will need to configure robots, etc., to prevent search engines from grabbing this information and indexing. But otherwise, the documentation will be present and available by the link.
Sorry. So like so once 3.1 comes out and introduces a new feature, that'll have the documentation, but I'll have like a drop-down option or something to go back to the 3.0 that doesn't have it, and I just won't see that documentation, and that'll be how we maintain it.
Well, personally, I think that one documentation for 3.x should be enough. So basically, yeah, we introduced new features. As we go, we updated the documentation. And for example, if we introduce some changes that are available only in a specific version, so we have an example for CLI from Igor, I believe. So basically, when you go to CLI page, it's CLI just, no. Okay, we still need to improve navigation, and I will show it later how it looks. Yeah, so there is definitely a page somewhere, I believe standalone, that documents the options. And there we can basically just put that this option is available from particular minor version. But I think that only one, we need only one branch for major version. So we do not need to have version, for example, for 3.0x and 3.1x. So we basically have branches for major versions. Within a version, we just have a rolling update. And when the time comes, we can just clean up the things. So there is definitely an example that needs to be cleaned up, I believe. That, for example, the pages often mention something like before version 2.20 something, it behaves like that. Otherwise, it behaves like that. I believe it's on Spring Boot or whatever, but yeah, there are a few references like that on the page. And basically, this is something that we will need to eventually clean up. But once we are within the baseline, I think it should be okay. Then once we update to the new baseline, we just need to something like that. And yeah, before that, so when we update to 3.x, I think that all these comments need to be cleaned up. So at the moment, I haven't done it for 3.x documentation to prevent merge conflicts. But in ideal world, we should clean up these warnings.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think part of that issue, or the issue or idea that I raised, was just that when I'm like answering questions, sometimes it's really frustrating for the people I'm helping, because they'll be like, I'll be like, oh yeah, you can use like logical and or, and then it turns out they're running like 2.15, which does not have logical and or, and there's not really anywhere in the documentation that says that it's not in 2.15 or whatever version you're using. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was kind of the main push of that thing, is like, if we can have for anything that I don't know, just like adding versioning so that people can see, oh, am I running the right version? And I think maybe part of it comes from the fact that people aren't upgrading WireMock very often. So you will have people who are still running on like 2.15. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, it's a little early for me.
So it's easy to do it on the page level, on the section level. So for example, this page is not a good example. Okay, let's take JUnit 4. So if you have a use case like, let's say access the stubing and verification. So I could just put a macro that shows the version, and then do various magic comparison that shows that, for example, for 3.x, it's supported out of the box everywhere. For 2.x, it's supported from a particular version. But yeah, it will require some attention from documentation contributors so that this metadata is set, especially on the Jekyll engine, because Jekyll is super weak when it comes to multi-page content. But yeah, I will try to do a few bits. And same on the page level, it's easier. So basically, I already do this warning basically by adding some page and site metadata so that we can easily tinker so that it becomes easier to navigate. Okay. So does it answer your comment, Aaron?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So a few other items that I'm currently working on. So one of the items is documentation landing. So it's basically a pull request submitted just yesterday, which is kind of ready for review. I will show it first, and then I will show all the pull requests regarding the documentation restructuring, because it might be a bit more controversial than just documentation landing. Okay, so I just have it running locally, so I think that it should work. It still works. So basically, what Aaron said before and what we all saw that the initial landing is quite complicated. It's hard to discover use cases, how to follow that. And basically, I decided to apply a few practices which I saw in other projects and which I advocate for. Basically converting the /docs page and maybe then subsection pages to a kind of navigation bar, which helps you to discover the content, but doesn't have much content on its own. So for example, currently, if you go to WireMock.docs, it's basically something like that, a bunch of text, and then you navigate by this link. So what I try to do instead is taking key entry items. So for example, for getting started, you want overview, you want a quick start. There is also historical download things and also how to get help. And basically I put it here. Then same for distributions. So we have standalone jar and Docker at the moment, official ones. I also added a grouping by use case. So this is what we have on the landing instead extending. And I also finally added a grouping by technology. So the final ordering is subject for feedback, or maybe we could use tabs. So something like there is a tab that shows by use case, and you switch to another tab, there would be it will be shown by technology. So it's something that I could probably do, though I'm not a front-end developer and my capabilities there are limited. So any feedback how it could look like would be appreciated. But basically my vision is somehow update the navigation here so that it provides quick access to key content, but we don't put everything there. We still have this landing, which will keep reworking and making it easier. So for example, stubbing and verifying definitely deserves its own landing page, and it doesn't have one at the moment. So this is something I will add, same for maybe record and playback. So we will have multiple entry points. And in addition, so you might have seen my messages about this document. So this is a Google document where I tried to capture all the technologies related to WireMock for different stacks. And what I try to do, and what for example, we tried to do in Jenkins and actually failed because nobody was around to maintain big articles. So, well, it's somewhere here. Yeah, there are solution pages for Jenkins. And this approach didn't quite work because we put a lot of content here, which was difficult to maintain. So for WireMock, I tried to actually do the same, but quite differently. So currently I have an example, for example, for Android, which is a historical page I reworked. And there basically, I just intend to keep, to put references and with explicit disclaimers so that if people need recent content, etc., they should follow the pages and they're welcome to contribute. But at the same time, I still think that such a solution, let's say for Android, is important. The rendering is terrible, so this will change, of course. So the idea was that I would put pages like that for key technology stacks, and for what we already have in the ecosystem, whether it's within WireMock GitHub organization or elsewhere. And everything will be shipped under a big disclaimer that it's not something we guarantee. Basically, I did the same for Kotlin. So this is a page I created from scratch. So there are two projects for Kotlin. One is DSL bindings, and another one is code test extension. So it's a test framework. So again, I just took the content, added example, and the rest comes in references. So there is no plan to have extensive content here, but I think that as a navigation, it would be still useful. What do you think? Rob, you're unmuted. Yeah, please.
The thing I find most frustrating of all about our documentation at the moment is there's no anchor tags. So we have very long pages.
Yeah, I actually have it in mind, but I will create a ticket. So anchor tags are important.
Yeah.
Well, basically it's just a style with some JavaScript. So I will embed it in Jekyll. Well, Jekyll itself is not very powerful, but once you get to HTML and scripting, there is a lot of things you can do. Maybe later I will add support for HAML. It's basically another markup format that is more friendly than just writing in HTML with some additional macros. But yeah, it's to be seen in the future. Still, well, it kind of works. Yeah, so noted about anchors. This is something we will add for sure. Basically, yeah, I also want to have a table of contents for the page. We actually have some space here that we could put at least for white screens. So it could also help. Yeah, better structuring. So this is something I'm going to show later. Oh, we lost Rob, but yeah, so I'm also working on this navbar to make more friendly. So for example, root documentation entries and just generic structuring, which would be a bit more handy, because for example, running with Android is definitely not a key use case to be shown here. Okay, any comments before we proceed? Okay, so yeah, this is what we have for landing documentation. I haven't touched landing yet, but I will be also tinkering a bit because I think that we can put more useful information here. And one important thing is actually having a kind of jumbotron where we could announce key features. So for example, WireMock 3 ships, or we have, for example, a major update of WireMock Python as it happens now, or some other things. So I would like to highlight it a bit more here. So it's something in the future and not strictly tied to the documentation. Okay. Another pull request that I actually wanted to show you is a change of the navigation bar I want to make. So the advantage of our current documentation structure is that we can have different file structure and different navigation bar. So this is something I'm going to exploit to actually to make the things easily browsable. If you want, I can show it live, but at the moment I will just do a screenshot driven presentation. So basically, what is our current thing that we have a kind of information. So for example, getting started provides a lot of things like installing from Maven, running with JUnit, but then a weird thing started, think like writing a test with JUnit 5 with no documentation, and you go there and there is just a spec, there is no step-by-step guide. Then there is non-JUnit and general Java usage with, again, advanced use case, running standalone, which is an advanced use case, and then deploying into your server container. To be honest, 2023, I wouldn't do it at all, but still it's somewhere on the documentation. So yeah. Yeah, what I want to do is completely flip the table in terms of navigation. I want to have to put all information overview to the overview page. So basically, this is what was all the /docs. Then I want to have a number of quick starts. So at the moment, I just detached quick start for Java and JUnit. So step-by-step guide, which just does this thing and nothing else. I also created a page for WireMock tutorials, which includes the rest of the content. And then I started breaking down the rest of the sections, but I started moving more and more things towards advanced use cases. So the things that you probably do not want to do by default, like WireMock on Java 1.7, but still important to keep in documentation for some cases. And another thing that I actually also introduce section for WireMock standalone, because we have Docker documentation, we have standalone process, we have an administration API, and before that, the documentation was all over the place. So I tried to consolidate it a bit. Why is it even called docs landing? Yeah, I guess I messed up the branch at some point. But yeah. Just a second, I will interrupt Jekyll for a second. Okay. Yeah, this is why I don't like doing live demos, because then I have a lot of typos here and there to embarrass me for life. Okay. So it will take some time to run, because as always, Zoom takes all the memory on the laptop, but yeah, it should eventually start up. While we are starting up, some disclaimers. So I started breaking down the configuration files. So now there is a separate config file for 3.x, and I will probably introduce another file for production, because right now we have a bunch of things like analytics that is embedded in the developer config file, and I want to remove it. Okay, we actually slowing, should be running out of time, but yeah, we still have some time. Okay, so the same thing, but now live. Okay, I hope it works. Okay, so basically this is how it looks like. We have overview, and the overview is just a bunch of text. Later I will put some images there, etc. Maybe remove the text a bit to make it simple. Also, we have quick start, which is again just step-by-step guideline how you get started with JUnit 4. As Tom mentioned in the review, we need to switch to JUnit 5 by default, and I totally support it. And yeah, then we have download and installation, which is cleaned up, so there is no Java 7, etc. There is still direct download and things I would like to improve, because, for example, standalone and Maven might be a bit confusing, especially since you actually use standalone for some use cases in Maven. But yeah, it's something we just need to clean up. And we have a WireMock tutorials, which is expected to grow significantly. So what I put right now is API mocking, download installation. We also have a kind of generic intro workshop by Bas, which I included right into the page. Same, we have running QAcceptance tests in Kubernetes by Sebastian. That works. I already verified it. And we also have WireMock for Android, which unlikely works, but I put it here right now. So this is what we have. And obviously, we need a lot more tutorials and especially quick starts over time. But I just want to have a page where you can actually reference it. So for WireMock standalone, again, I want to put more emphasis on Docker and containers, because at least my gut feeling that at the moment, more people should be starting with Docker than with standalone Java process, especially if we embed some quality of life things like extension management into Docker over time. But yeah, at least we have some grouping for these things at the moment. And the same for Java, for stubbing and verifying, etc. So I started doing some sorting. Later, I will add landing page. I will add collapsing by default here. So we will be able to host more information. And maybe for things like WireMock Python, if we decide to move WireMock Python from read the docs to WireMock website. So it's something to be discussed with Mike. Because right now it's a separate page. We will be able to host more content there. The problem is hosting more content is not something I actually want, because I'm a big fan of documentation as code, and I cordially believe that the documentation should be a part of the respective repositories, because otherwise it's super difficult to maintain the content, and I would rather expect the contributors to patch documentation and features at the same time. So in the future, I want to switch to an engine like Antora or the Kuzaras that allows importing content easily. But at the moment, I just want to improve the things and probably moving out from RST files here and the standalone hosting for WireMock Python is something we need, because this page is super confusing. For example, it still appears in index when you will just search for WireMock, because the landing specifies Python just here. So it's not something like WireMock Python, etc. And these things need to be consolidated as well if we want to provide better SEO. And once we have solution pages, etc., obviously everything will be available on per technology basis for that. So this is what I wanted to show you. For the documentation, I basically have a small milestone for myself, just basically the stuff I'm working on here. And in addition to what I presented, I also have a few items like updating Spring Boot page, because now we have a really nice framework for Spring Boot. Also fixing various bugs like missing open graphs, adding social media sharing. I will add anchors for pages to my scope for the next few weeks for sure. But this is basically the scope I have at the moment. And all things like changing the documentation engine along in the future. The question is it something like you would like to see the website evolving, or do you think that we should prioritize something else first? Or is it something completely missing from the vision at the moment? Any feedback? Any wish lists? Meanwhile, I'll add documentation anchors.
Yeah, I think I'm going to make another ticket for something else because I had a weird idea, but I need to get my examples together for it. Essentially, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. So yeah, for any idea you have, just submit a ticket. So there are some templates, etc. So you can just follow them. And well, Aaron already created 2 tickets. Thanks a lot, working on them. And in addition, so what I would like to see in the future in terms of user experience. So what we do in Jenkins and other projects like Captain, basically there is improve this page and report a problem. So improve this, again, the UX here could have been much better, but edit this page sends you directly to the page and GitHub editor. So you can just edit and submit a pull request. and report the problem, forwards you to the issue template again with some items parsed. So, for example, we extract the link right away, etc. So I would like to have the same experience for WireMock users on the documentation. Well, yeah, if you start including content using submodels, etc., it's not going to be the most easy story. But I want to support it at least for some use cases so that people can easily contribute patches without actually discovering where the heck this page is located, because right now it's not guaranteed based on the structure. Yes, Kapesh? Okay. So basically, yeah, this is what I wanted to present today in terms of what's going on. And again, if you have any ideas, if you want to contribute a patch, once we merge these two big pull requests that I presented today, I think that the documentation becomes kind of contributable. So you can start tinkering with the things, and hopefully I won't be creating big pull requests going forward. So for example, for solution pages, etc., I will just create some stubs, and then I will work on the content incrementally and will be poking respective maintainers of components for reviews. So if you want to contribute, if you want to patch something for your features and your tools you're working on, I think that it will be ready for contributions tomorrow or maybe even today. Okay. So the video recording will cut in 1 minute because due to reasons unknown, I'm not on the pro account. But yeah, we can continue the discussion or reconnect to another link if you want. So yeah, probably I will just stop the recording and then we can keep chatting without time pressure.